Yeah, this one here. All those genes that they were looked at, they concluded that the pathogenic mutations, for example, in Nigeria, were not common in Nigerians. There was another study that was done and this one was done in which country? Okay. It's an African country as well. And the conclusion was also that mutations are not common because of the in South African populations. This was done in South Africa. There was another Ghanaian study that also looked at the same, like two genes. And there was another one from Zambia that looks at the SNCA, like two PK1, etc. And these studies don't detect pathogenic mutations among indigenous black Parkinson's disease patients compared to other populations in other parts of the world. So there are various conclusions, as I said, that can be drawn from this study. The first one is that these mutations were not observed in sub-Saharan Africa, suggests that Parkinson's disease in this region may have unique genetic heritage, which opens, of course, opportunities for that can aid in understanding Parkinson's disease in Africa as well as in Africa. And the genetic architecture of the indigenous people of sub-Saharan Africa appears to be different from other populations outside Africa. And despite the progress made in the past decade in genetics in the regards of South African BD, it remains largely unexplored, offering potential for various studies on the diversity that exists in this region that can support research in other areas. So there are other similar studies that have been done in other countries, in Nigeria, Tanzania, Zambia, Ghana. The references are there. So the major deficit that exists, this is a major deficit given that African populations, as my colleague had said, have the highest genetic diversity in the world. So this is important because it can potentially give novel insights into the disease mechanisms and pathways that cause Parkinson's disease. So I want to move to the next section where I'm going to talk about the impact of chemicals or exposure to environmental toxins, how it affects this. I think just as a prelude to that, the combination of genetic and environmental factors cause BD, including health trauma. And the genetic makeup of an individual can potentially predispose one to develop it, as we have said. So in the African context, we do have what I can call a problem with regulatory processes in terms of exposure to potentially toxic chemicals. And some of the research that it might be done going forward, that is currently being done, one of the impact will be the policy on how to deal with some of this. I just have some interesting pictures here. If you look at this one, these are lead pipes. I think in this room, there are people from various countries. Here in Kenya, if you live in houses that were built before 1950, most of these are city council houses, Nairobi city council houses. Some of them still have lead pipes in them. And you know that lead as a metal is a neurotoxin. Extensive research has been done on it, and it is even known or characterized to reduce IQ or the potential of children to perform well in school in other countries. So this is a very serious problem. In a lot of countries, there are still many houses that have lead pipes. I don't know if the case in your countries, but all homes in Kenya still have them. There are some cooking materials that we use, especially this one here. It has a material that is called Teflon or Teflon cooking ware. Very, very much used by middle class people like most of you here. But know that the non-stick chemical here, polymer, that makes it not stick the food that you're cooking, is a synthetic polymer that is it's a very serious neurotoxin. At very high temperatures, it leaches and mixes with the food that you're cooking. And This is an aluminium pot, cooking pot as well. The aluminium is also a neurotoxin and causes other adverse effects in the body. At very high temperatures, it also leaches into the food that you cook, potentially harmful. I have another picture here of scrap metal cooking pots. These are very popular in Africa. I think in Nairobi, a lot of people have this in their homes for cooking debate and other foods that require cooking for long hours. So in my house, it took almost a fight to get rid of this because some people did think that it's harmful. So this, how are these made? You see these guys here, these ones here. I don't know if the picture is clear. You see these Juakali people? They have all sorts of scrap metal that is used to make things like that. Some of this metal here is coming from all the batteries, very, very toxic chemicals. They do not know that what they're handling is toxic. There's a colleague at Technical University of Kenya in Chemistry Department who has been educating Juakali workers on the potential toxic exposures that they have when they make things like this. So this is a problem in Kenya and other African countries. There's a lot of products that are made from here and from this kind of activities that are used to make things that we interact with every day, sometimes to cook our own food. So it's very important to be very careful. So I think it's important that we do research on these things so that it can inform policy. This is an old cooking pot. My mom used to have a lot of this one here. And there are a lot of research papers that have been done that shows that these old pots also they contaminate food that is cooked in them with various types of metals. So why did I put here this picture here? In Egypt, do you have this? Actually, do you have this in your country, this type of cooking vessels? Yeah, so I put it there because the recommendation of the paper that I was looking at is that cookware that is made from clay or ceramic is the safest to use. And in North America and other developed countries, these are very expensive to buy, but it's the safest one to use. Africans used to use this to make their food. It's made from clay and very safe, does not contaminate food at all. And the other safe alternative is glassware, cooking material that is made from glassware, or the traditional cast, they call it cast iron. Cast iron is also considered safe alternative to all these other things that we're talking about, including these ones and these ones. So I think that I needed to speak about manganese. There's a lot of publications that have been done on the potential of manganese to cause Parkinsonism. That means it causes the uses damage that almost imitates like Parkinson's disease, and at least 2 of the symptoms are similar. And there's a lot of papers that have been done on this in South Africa, where manganese is mined. South Africa supplies 80% of the global manganese market, and a lot of studies that have been done there indicate that a lot of workers in those mines, a very high percentage of them, end up developing Parkinsonism symptoms of disease. And I also wanted to comment about the articles. Like, yeah, there's another potential environmental exposure, what they call poly, yeah, chlorinated PCBs. These are banned in North America and other European countries. One of the main sources of these compounds They are very toxic with the potential for causing Parkinson's disease is found in discarded transformers, power transformers. And in other countries where regulations are in place, the disposal of this kind of equipment is highly controlled because they know the potential environmental damage it can cause because it releases a lot of PCBs and other electronic devices as well. So there's a need for research to inform policy on how we deal with this, some of these that discharge chemicals that can use PCB. In fact, high levels of PCBs in brains of Parkinson's patients have been confirmed in various studies. Occupational exposure to PCBs portends greater risk for Parkinson's disease, especially for women. There are other many things that we can talk about in regards to chemical exposure, like agricultural paraquat is a chemical called paraquat that is found. You can even see from the data that is presented that depending on where you come from, in North Africa, the distribution is different. The genetic variations are different. To come to West Africa, they are different. So where you stay can be a risk factor, geographical location. And that has to do with what are some of the things that we interact with in that environment. And pesticides, we talked about them. This one is particularly notorious. I talked about glyphosate, which has a higher risk for developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But we have also done research on and published a paper on that. So there are potential protective factors. When I was writing this list, I think the two presenters talked about smoking. I just was so uncomfortable with it, I didn't list it on my list. But research has shown that it can prevent development of ED or slow it down. Vitamin D, exercise. There's some findings on statin drugs that lower cholesterol being beneficial. Anti-inflammatory drugs, antioxidants. And based on these two here, myself and my collaborators at Technical University of Kenya have done a number of studies on how antioxidants or anti-inflammatory molecules, not necessarily drugs, they can be nutritional molecules, how they might help in diseases where you have severe inflammation and oxidative stress. So the reason why I'll show you a little bit of very, very preliminary data on this is because we believe that these findings, that in the studies that we have done, could be applied in further studies on Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases might be beneficial for those studies. And the other, just before I go to those slides, I wanted to say that one of the things personally I believe in, based on my own research and what others have done, is that increasingly it's becoming evident that pharmacological intervention alone does not give sometimes the best outcome. If you put it together with other interventions, what we might call adjunct therapy. To give you an example, COVID-19 killed very many Kenyans. But I was informed that there could be some doctors in this room. If you went in with very severe COVID, on the top hospitals in Nairobi, before they start you on any drug treatment, they will give you vitamin D. Yeah, why? Why were they doing that? Because it is increasingly evident that if you can support the physiological process to heal itself alongside the conventional medicine, you get better outcome. So based on that, we have done a number of studies on arsenic toxicity. Arsenic is a metal that is extremely toxic. It has also been used in chemical weapons and the most interesting part about it is that there are some drugs or medical products that we use that have arsenic as the active ingredient. One of them is melasopro, a very important drug that is used for treating human African trichomoniasis, the late stage, severe stage. Melasopro has arsenic, an organic arsenic, as an active ingredient. So, so the first study we did on this was because Increasingly in Kenya, we have mining activities in the northern parts of Kenya, mining activities for oil and other minerals that have exposed a lot of communities there to arsenic. And because of that, there's a lot of reports of neurological problems and cancer. But particularly this study that we did with Dr. Nyariku is here, we wanted to see if, because we cannot develop a new molecule at this point, Melasopro is the only drug that is available for treating late-stage human African trichomoniasis. The drug itself is extremely toxic. Many other studies that we have done in regard to CoQ10 with potential for neuroprotection that might be useful for neurodegenerative diseases. So the most recent paper is on PMC pharmacology and toxicology that was on CoQ10 that we use alongside DMSA to protect from arsenic exposure. So there are some figures here. This is also, I just want to show you something. If you look at this one here, and these two, there's what is called Evans Blue assay. It is used to measure the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. If there's breach of the blood-brain barrier, and you use this dye, if you inject it into the animal, a lot of it gets into the brain and you have this very dark color here. So in human African trichomoniasis, there's severe breach of the BBB, the blood-brain barrier. So we wanted to see some of the beneficial effects that we have seen from here, just being preliminary studies of what could be the mechanisms. And you can see here that it almost protects the blood-brain barrier from the effects of the parasite, almost at the level of the control. And after that, I think we have done other studies on ECM, experimental cerebral malaria, which also has severe inflammation, severe oxidative stress. Those are hallmarks of somebody who has severe cerebral malaria. So you might ask yourself, why am I showing you slides on a study on malaria? And we are talking about neurodegenerative diseases. It's because there are two things that happen there: severe inflammation, severe oxidative stress. So in our future studies, we intend to try and see if this can be beneficial in this process in regard to protection of the blood-brain integrity. Could it be useful for other diseases where you have breach of the blood-brain barrier and where you have brain damage? So we have also done other studies using encophalopathy, which is a non-pharmacological agent or herbal product that is used to treat, that improves memory and learning, the same, and we have seen how it boosts or protects depletion of glutathione, which is one of the most potent antioxidants that people have. It also prevents from repeat peroxidation damage from oxidative stress reactive protein species, the data is clear, and also the effect on nitric oxide. Some of these are very preliminary studies that also have other very detailed studies ongoing. So we also did this study on the SEM, and the data was also positive in that regard, even with GPE. And what about vitamin B12? We also thought that it might actually be useful, and you can see that it also protects the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. This very simple experiment shows that. So I think with those few very preliminary data, I wanted to conclude by saying that in Africa, there are various impediments or challenges that hinder research in Parkinson's disease. And one of them that I thought is extremely important is, I was discussing with my colleague there, the fact that it is very difficult to find appropriate animal models. I think Dr. Jilan is here, he can agree with me, that if you want to do a specific study on Parkinson's disease and you require an animal model, it's very difficult to access that. If you need to import a mice model or a bone model from another country, it's extremely expensive, and the regulatory frameworks to move animals around is extremely burdensome. So animal models is a challenge. There's also the perception of witchcrafts and stigma about the disease that hinders access to the data that scientists require. In terms of the cost, the low coverage of health insurance, these are challenges. Sometimes it's, as my colleague said, the difficulty to access the family history of Parkinson's because of fear of stigma. This is common here. I've talked about the animal model. There's also the issue of low expertise and inadequate facilities. I think there was a study that was done in 2020 in, where was this? And in 11 African countries. And they found out that in 11 African countries, they did not have any neurological services at all, zero. And some of this could be attributed to immigration, where we have expertise from the continent going to other countries, but still there's a problem. There's a problem with diagnosis, ability to afford appropriate medication, levodopa, carbidopa, and also it is even more difficult to access the dopamine agonists because they are more expensive than the other two. So there are issues, infrastructure issues, there are human resource issues, there are other cultural issues that impede the research in Parkinson's disease. So this creates opportunity for capacity building in the continent, and then genetic and environmental diversity across the continent is great. That creates research and epidemiological opportunities in research and epidemiological patterns of BP, clinical phenotypes, and other genetic and environmental factors that cause it. So there's need to partner with other global organizations that are very much involved in Parkinson's disease research. So with those few remarks, that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Prof. Do we have any question? But before we go into the question, I also want to say that thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. And one of the only question I have perhaps is that in your interesting presentation, you talked about the environmental toxins that are very common in the Kenyan population. So I would like to know if there are initiatives like organization, non-government organization in Kenya already creating awareness or educating people about some of these things that they are exposed to on daily basis that they are not aware of. And there might not be an immediate effect, but at long run, after so many years, there will be, I can see that they are innovating and
Thanks very much for that question. I'm aware of one at the Technical University of Kenya where I work. The Department of Chemistry formed a foundation, chemical safety, they call it the Foundation on Chemical Safety. As I said, they are the ones who have been going around. In Kenya, we call them chuakali. The people make products from waste metal, scrap metal. We call them chuakali artisans. So they have held very targeted training with these individuals, very many of them, and they had funding, enough funding to do that. In Kenya, we do have government agencies which are supposed to do this also. We call it NEMA, National Environmental Authority. And I think for us, this could be the only two that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of other extensive organizations that support this. There could be. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have just a comment about heavy metals and also pesticides and secret and other toxins. The problem, I think, is that they are inducing several lesions in the brain, not specific to the nigrous striatal projection. And this is why the dopaminergic treatments have not worked in these animals and also in patients with this kind of pathologies. You have to pay attention to the difference between Parkinsonism and the Parkinson's, idiopathic Parkinson's disease. And we have very, very different markers in the brain with these intoxications. We did a lot of work on animals with this we found many, many differences between Parkinson's disease and the use of these toxins.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. I think it's common knowledge what you say. Even manganese itself, that is very well characterized. The symptoms are not classic. There are only two. Non-responsive to levodopa is one of them, and the other one I think is to do with the tremor at rest. So that's true. So it's important that we characterize each of these so that we can understand how do they contribute or at the end of the day end up as a risk factor for BD. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one more question. You just take. Oh, it's really.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful presentation. My question is to you and to other previous speakers. When we talk of neurodegenerative disease or disorder, I want to believe that some people start experiencing them at the reproductive age. My interest is reproductive health. So my question is, are there studies that have been done on the effects of neurodegenerative diseases or disorders on gametogenesis? Gametogenesis.
Please, your name.
Oh, my name is Jailo Biro. I work here at the Institute of Climate Research.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think anybody can respond to that. The only thing I can say is that chemical toxins impact gametogenesis negatively. But the disease itself, Parkinson's disease, if it has an effect on gametogenesis, I think I'll want to hear what others say about it. I haven't come across anything of that nature. Thank you.
Okay, your name.
Thank you, Boso, for your presentation. My name is Vivian Nguwe from Cameroon. Guys, my question is about mycotoxin. I want to know if mycotoxin have the same effect that the inhibitor in Parkinson's disease.
Thanks for that. Well, I'll answer it this way. There's what is called the gut-brain axis, and whatever happens in your gut impacts brain function in terms of information that moves between the brain and the gut. That includes neurotransmission, immune system modulation, and neurotransmitter synthesis. So if you take something that has mycotoxins into your stomach and causes serious problems there, in a way it impacts your brain, especially through the modulation of the immune system, which can sometimes negatively affect the way the brain function works. The other way that you can look at that is some mycotoxins are extremely toxic to organ systems like the liver. If there's extensive damage to the liver, it can have other unintended consequences in other parts of the body that might include brain function. So that's probably the way I look at it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just take a quick one and then we'll stop because we'll go to the next one.
My name is Michael Ndumo, and I work here at IPR. My question is, are there any studies correlating Parkinson's disease and heavy metal poisoning with neurohormones? Neurohormones, or the hormonal profiles in patients with Parkinson's disease and heavy metal poisoning?
So I think one of all of these neurodegenerative diseases we are talking about, what we are talking about, BP, Alzheimer's disease, most of them have aggregation of proteins or formation of clump proteins in the brain, which causes oxidative stress, inflammation, and can actually cause nerve damage. But in regards to just the question again, I think I missed it.
If the neurohormonal profiles, the hormones that are neurotransmitters, like vasopressin, for example, whether they've been profiled against cases of PD and toxic, heavy metal toxicity by metals in the brain. the hormones, the new hormones.
I just want to say that there will be some presentations that will address that as we progress in this workshop.
But it would be interesting, something to think about. I haven't come across it. Possibilities there.
Well, it could be an interesting project, and it could be the start of a new project. Like for example, the manifestation of the disease in pH around puberty compared to people who are stabilized the hormonal outputs. It definitely both finding of neurotransmitters being like accordingly to age and maybe the susceptibility to Parkinson's disease. That's an interesting area to look into. Like there will also be differences between female and males. You know, those are areas to and I won't be surprised if there could be differences in expression of testosterone and estrogen in young versus old people. It's quite impressive. Okay, we can take more questions. Thank you very much, Prof, for that presentation. A round of applause, please. So we'll go next to the next presenter, who is already waiting for us online. And the next presenter will be talking about hereditary ataxia. And the name of the presenter is Dr. Zakai Al-Dajani. Are you guys booked up? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me for this meeting, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. And I'm very glad and pleased to be here today, speaking on hereditary ataxia. I'll just make some few marketing slides that I've put up on the Movement for the Society. And there are opportunities here for free membership types, including juniors, students, no-fee countries, and the retirees as well. Membership benefits include free access to courses and self-guided modules, include also reduced registration rates, lots of videos and journals and articles and podcasts is a benefit joining the there are some upcoming courses also that are related to this region. Skills workshop, the journal club, which is new, and the review case series as well. And I'd like to invite everyone to join us in Calcutta next year, in March 17 to 19, for the 8th Asian American Parkinson's Disease Movement Disorder Congress. And now to the core of the lecture. And my talk today in the next 25 minutes will be on hereditary ataxia. I have no actual. And in the next 25 minutes, I'll describe the clinical characteristics of hereditary ataxias, review common and notable genetic causes of hereditary ataxias, provide an evaluation strategy to identify the genetic cause of hereditary ataxias, and review some of the movement of hereditary ataxias, especially symptomatic ones. Generally speaking, attack or manifestation is a clinical syndrome comprised of such as nystagmus, jerky saccadic pursuit, and saccadic hypometria or hypermetria, as well as dyskinesias. There are 4 types of ataxias: the vestibular type, which includes nystagmus, vertigo, lack of limb ataxia. Another type is the frontal lobe ataxia, which is characterized by slow gait, lack of limb ataxia. However, there's this dysarthria, and abnormal position sense. The cerebellar type, as we all know, has ataxia, nystagmus, and imbalance, as well as dysarthria, and normal, but there is normal position sense, which differentiates it from sensory ataxia. I'll just turn on this video, and in this video you can see the different degrees of gait ataxia in this 18-year-old patient who has mild gait ataxia manifesting with variable step length, side steps, and veering towards the side.
Okay, come down. Okay, stop right there.
This next patient is a 37-year-old with an obvious wide-based gait ataxia. You can see the difference of different ataxias, starting with the staggering gait and then moving on and progressing to become wide-based and veering to the sides as well. This next video is on a 32-year-old woman who exhibited wide-based ataxia and shorter stride length, and this is a severe form of ataxia. So generally speaking, approaching a patient, regardless of whether it is hereditary or acquired ataxias, but particularly in hereditary patients, you need to dig in very much on the family history. So family history is not just limited to ataxia. You need to inquire about other symptoms that coincide or go alongside with ataxia, such as neuropathy, eye signs, cardiac signs, etc. And consider patients with dementia as well, other movement disorders like tremors, Parkinsons, chorea, dystonia, epilepsy, mental retardation, and learning disabilities. Psychiatric history is important, especially a history of suicide and alcoholism, history of institutionalization, whether it be for the patient or the family, or a member of the family, even if it's a distant family like aunts and uncles and cousins. Cerebral palsy is an important history to take into account, as well as visual loss, premature ovarian failure in females, and autonomic dysfunction, and other systemic diseases. Now, the detailed family pedigree, never accept old age as a cause of death. Dig more into the history, inquire whether the parents remain ambulatory throughout their lives, inquire more about aunts, uncles, and first cousins as well, and inquire more about any member of the family, especially aunts, uncles, and first cousins, why they were institutionalized, where they, if a family member has been labeled as alcoholic, make sure that this was really alcoholic and not staggering gait or ataxia due to another cause. Children, were there any difficulty learning to walk, learning disability as well. The ethnicity is very important, especially those coming from a Jewish Ashkenazi ancestry, where scar-free is common. French Canadians, SPP7 is common there, and any possibility of consanguinity, especially in consanguineous communities. So the diagnosis of the cause of ataxia in adults, you must make sure that the symptoms include gait ataxia, dysarthria, nystagmus, intention tremor, dyspnea, dysdiadokinesias, and then look into the acquired cause. Now, I won't go into detail into the acquired cause, as this is a hereditary ataxia talk, but make sure that whether this progression is fast or